They entered the water seeking adventure, but what they found was pure terror. From jet ski races turned deadly to night swims interrupted by ruthless predators, these stories reveal the raw, unpredictable violence of shark attacks. In this video, you'll watch 6 harrowing survival stories where humans came face to face with one of nature's most feared hunters. Alex Petrov had spent most of his life studying the ocean's most feared predators, but nothing in his years of training or experience had prepared him for what unfolded that morning. He was a 38-year-old marine biologist, lean and methodical, with a quiet resolve that made him a natural leader in high-stress environments. Stationed aboard a small research vessel drifting off the coast of Gansby, South Africa, Alex and his dive team were preparing to tag a large great white shark spotted in the area the day before. The ocean was calm, deceptively peaceful, and visibility beneath the surface was excellent. Alex, equipped with a tagging spear and a lightweight underwater camera rig, dropped into the water first, followed by 2 experienced divers flanking him. They descended slowly, scanning the water around them for movement. The shark had been tracked over the past 2 days, and Alex hoped to get close enough for a clean, safe tagging, an operation he had done dozens of times before without incident. They spotted the shark minutes later. It was a colossal great white, easily over 16 feet long, gliding through the water with chilling grace. Its powerful body shimmered in the filtered sunlight, and it moved in slow, sweeping arcs around the divers, showing initial curiosity but no signs of aggression. The team remained calm, careful to avoid sudden movements. Alex maneuvered closer, maintaining eye contact with the shark while preparing the tagging spear. Then, without warning, the shark shifted. Its graceful movements became jerky and abrupt. It circled tighter, the black of its eyes locking onto Alex with unsettling intensity. The divers knew the signs. Something had changed in the shark's behavior. Before Alex could retreat, the predator lunged. The impact was sudden and brutal. The shark's jaws clamped down on Alex's right leg, and he felt bone crushed instantly beneath the pressure. The pain was blinding, but adrenaline took over. The shark thrashed violently, dragging Alex downward, spinning as it pulled him deeper into open water. Blood clouded the sea around them, and the other divers tried to stay close but couldn't risk getting too near without drawing the shark's attention or becoming collateral targets. Alex fought to stay conscious. His leg felt like it was being torn from his body. He slammed his free hand against the shark's snout, desperate to trigger a release. But the shark was locked in, determined and relentless. The divers attempted to strike at the shark with blunt poles, but the water was chaotic, full of blood and turbulence. Visibility dropped, and every movement felt like a gamble. From the surface, the boat's captain radioed for emergency assistance, reporting an active shark attack with a diver still underwater. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. The crew threw weights and noisemakers into the water to distract the shark, but nothing worked. The predator seemed possessed, focused entirely on dragging Alex away from the others and deeper into the abyss. Alex was slipping in and out of consciousness when a pounding thrum began to echo through the water. A helicopter had arrived, faster than anyone expected. It hovered low above the dive site, blades cutting through the air with deafening force. A powerful spotlight sliced through the fading daylight, illuminating the red-stained water where the divers were still trying to save their team leader. From the helicopter's open side door, a crew member used a bullhorn to blast sound waves into the air and sea. The low-frequency pulses were designed to disorient large marine animals in emergencies, and it was a long shot, but their only one. The divers had retreated just enough to avoid being struck by the pulsing sound and spinning blades, but they kept their eyes locked on Alex, who was now barely moving. The great white shook him again, turning with violent energy before the spotlight beam hit it directly. For several agonizing seconds it held on, gnashing and twisting, but then suddenly it released. Whether from the noise, the light, or sheer confusion, the shark let go and vanished into the depths with a powerful flick of its tail. Alex floated limply, blood pouring from the shredded remains of his leg. 2 divers grabbed him, kicking hard toward the surface as the helicopter crew guided them with hand signals and searchlight sweeps. The team hauled Alex back onto the boat, his face pale, his breathing shallow but present. They packed his leg with gauze and tourniquets, keeping pressure on the wound as the chopper circled above, ready to guide emergency responders to their location. Back on shore, Alex was rushed to a trauma center. The damage was severe. His leg had been broken in multiple places, muscle and tissue torn nearly to the bone. But he survived, thanks to the diver's persistence and the helicopter team's fast action. He would walk again, though with a prosthetic and months of painful recovery ahead. The encounter left everyone shaken. Shark tagging was always risky, but no one had ever seen a white shark behave with such extended aggression. Experts speculated it might have been triggered by hunger, territoriality, or even a misinterpreted threat. Whatever the cause, the attack revealed just how quickly things could unravel, even for seasoned professionals. For Alex, the ordeal was more than just a brush with death. It was a stark reminder of nature's raw power and unpredictability. Though he had spent years learning to understand sharks, in that moment of violence and terror, all the science in the world meant nothing. Only instinct, teamwork, and sheer luck had brought him back from the deep. Even months later, the sound of helicopter blades would send a chill down his spine. But it was that very sound, the pounding, relentless rhythm overhead, that had saved his life when nothing else could. It took a helicopter to stop the ferocious great white shark that day, and Alex never forgot the way the ocean had turned against him without warning, as if to remind him who truly ruled its depths. Mike Donnelly wasn't the kind of man who passed unnoticed. At over 400 pounds, he carried the weight of a life marked by excess, but also by an unshakable sense of independence. He was 42, a retired long-haul trucker from upstate New York, and had recently moved to the Florida Keys in search of sun and some kind of peace he hadn't found on the road. Most nights, when the shoreline cleared of tourists and the world grew still, Mike would walk down to the water and wade out alone, letting the cool ocean cradle his bulk in darkness. On that moonless night, the air was thick and humid, and the shallow waves lapped gently at the sand. Mike stepped into the water slowly, as he always did, until it reached his chest. He floated, weightless and calm, letting the salt water wash away the noise of his thoughts. What he didn't know was that not far off, the blood and scraps from nearby fishing boats had stirred something far more dangerous into motion. A bull shark, thick-bodied and aggressive, had moved in closer to shore. Known for their erratic behavior and comfort in shallow water, bull sharks were infamous in Florida's coastal towns, though few people truly grasped just how unpredictable they could be. In the murky shallows that night, the shark cruised silently, drawn by scent and vibrations, each movement triggering its predatory instincts. Mike paddled lazily, eyes shut, unaware of the shadow that had veered toward him. The water felt different for a moment, cooler, heavier, but he dismissed it. Then, without warning, the ocean exploded beneath him. The shark struck hard, clamping its jaws around Mike's right calf with terrifying force. The pain was instant and total, unlike anything he had ever imagined. Flesh tore, bone cracked, and the water filled with blood as the shark thrashed violently, dragging him under before he could even inhale. Mike didn't scream. He couldn't. Salt water rushed into his nose and mouth, and his body convulsed in panic. His fist pounded the water, legs kicked in a wild blur of motion, but it was as if he were punching cement. The shark shook him again, twisting like a torpedo, its teeth ripping deeper as it tried to disable its prey. Mike's lungs burned. His world narrowed to pain and pressure, each second feeling like a lifetime of agony. He felt his calf give way, the muscle tearing like fabric, and he clawed at the water, desperate to reach the surface. His head broke through just long enough for a gasp. A nearby boat anchored close to a sandbar had seen the commotion. A young couple on board had noticed the splashing and the brief glimpse of a massive tail slicing through the waves. They reacted fast, throwing a life ring toward the thrashing figure and flashing their decklight toward the water, hoping to blind or confuse whatever was attacking. The shark didn't release immediately. It pulled again, submerging Mike in a gush of bubbles and blood. This time he fought harder, hammering with his fists, kicking with his remaining strength, trying to twist his body in any direction that might rip his leg free. He felt the shark shift slightly, grip loosening for a breath of a second. In that instant, Mike twisted violently, wrenching himself sideways, and the shark's teeth slipped free, leaving ribbons of flesh in their wake. He surfaced again, barely conscious, coughing and gasping. The pain so blinding he almost didn't notice the life ring floating beside him. A hand reached down from the boat, then two, and the couple managed to haul him up with brute strength, his blood trailing in the water below like smoke. Mike collapsed on the deck, his leg mangled, blood soaking the wooden planks. He could barely speak, his eyes wide, locked on the darkness from which the attack had come. The boaters applied pressure to the wound as best they could, wrapping it in towels and shirts, praying someone on the emergency channel would pick up fast enough. The shark was gone, vanished into the black water, leaving only a slick of blood and the thudding echo of fear. They raced toward the marina, throttle open, every wave a jolt of pain through Mike's leg. By the time emergency responders met them at the dock, he was drifting in and out of consciousness, white from blood loss but still alive. Medics couldn't believe he'd survived such a bite, especially considering how long the shark held on and how far offshore he'd been when it struck. At the hospital, surgeons worked for hours to repair what they could. He lost most of the muscle in his calf, and nerve damage would prevent him from walking normally again. But he kept the leg. Recovery was long, brutal, and filled with moments when the memory of warm salt water turned suddenly cold in his mind. Locals were stunned. Everyone in the Florida Keys knew bull sharks were out there, but few had heard of someone surviving such a direct encounter, especially at night, especially alone. Some blamed the nearby fishing boats. Others said Mike was reckless to swim after dark, but most agreed it was a miracle. One of those rare moments where sheer willpower and luck collided just enough to pull someone back from the edge. Mike never swam again. He still lived by the water, still walked the beach when his leg allowed it, but he never entered the ocean after sundown. The sea had shown him its teeth, and he would never forget what it felt like to be gripped by something so powerful, so mindless, and so full of hunger. Even a man of his size, a man who once thought his bulk gave him some measure of protection in a world full of risk, had learned the hard way that in the ocean, size meant nothing. In the shark's world, only instinct and opportunity mattered. And in the black waters of the Florida Keys, that night, a bull shark had proven it without mercy. Jason Cole had always chased speed. At 29, he was one of the most aggressive and daring riders on the jet ski circuit, known for cutting sharp turns and pushing through brutal wave conditions without hesitation. Lean and athletic, he lived for the adrenaline, the roar of the engine beneath him, and the spray of salt water stinging his face. That morning off Mozambique's coast, during a high-stakes jet ski race stretching across a stretch of turbulent ocean, he felt invincible as he surged past buoys and competitors alike, throttle wide open, engine screaming. The water was choppy but clear, deep blue under a cloudless sky. The lead pack of racers cut through the swells in tight formation, eyes locked ahead. Jason was near the front, leaning hard into every turn, when something shifted just beneath the surface. No one noticed it first, not the glint of movement nor the sudden absence of fish or birds, but the predator had already zeroed in. The great white shark was massive, over 18 feet long and heavy with power, patrolling deeper water until the roar of jet skis drew it closer to shore. Disoriented by the noise and vibrations, it had risen from the depths with force and purpose. Jason was seconds away from rounding a buoy when the sea ahead exploded upward. A white blur burst from the waves beside him, jaws open, momentum wild. The shark breached just feet from his jet ski, and before he could steer away, it slammed into the side of the craft with brutal weight. The impact sent the jet ski sideways in the air, then crashing down. Jason was hurled from the seat, his body flipping violently before vanishing into the sea. Underwater, the world turned silent and slow. Jason's leg burned with pain from the crash, but worse followed instantly. The shark lunged in the chaos, its mouth clamping down on his left thigh, teeth crushing muscle and scraping bone. The pain was blinding. He thrashed in instinctive terror, bubbles flooding his face and water filling his nose as the shark began to shake him like a toy. Blood bloomed around him, clouding his vision in red. His hands pushed against the shark's body, striking it. But nothing stopped its powerful jerks. Every shake sent new bursts of agony through his hip and groin. He couldn't think, only react, kicking with his free leg, clawing at the water, trying to find up, trying to breathe, and trying to survive. Above the surface, racers had turned their heads at the crash, expecting a fall, but what they saw instead left them frozen. The fins, the splash of blood, the empty jet ski spinning slowly in circles. All of it screamed one thing. Several riders broke from the racecourse and circled the area. One tossed a flotation ring into the water. Another revved their engine hard to draw attention away from where Jason had gone under. Someone screamed into a radio for emergency help. Below, Jason felt the shark twist one final time. Then, as quickly as it had struck, it let go. Whether disoriented by the noise or confused by the interference above, it released its grip and disappeared into the depths. Jason kicked upward with his good leg, lungs burning, strength draining from the blood pouring from his thigh. He broke the surface, gasping, face pale, arms flailing weakly. Two racers reached him first, pulling him toward a ski and helping him over with brute effort. His leg was torn open, meat and sinew exposed, blood streaming into the water, but he was alive. They sped toward the coast, cradling him between them, while a third rider followed close behind, watching the water with fear that the shark might come again. Jason drifted in and out of consciousness on the way back. His body shook from blood loss, his mind struggling to hold on to reality. Onshore medics waited, alerted by radio, and when the jet ski roared into the dock, they lifted him onto a stretcher and rushed him straight to a trauma unit nearby. Surgeons worked for hours. The leg was a wreck, but the femoral artery had somehow remained intact by luck or miracle. And that single fact had saved his life. The racing community was stunned. Jet ski racing had always felt dangerous in the way motorsports did. High speed, hard crashes, machine failure. But this was something else. A predator from the deep had interrupted the sport in a way no one expected. The illusion of safety was shattered. Discussions exploded across social media and in official meetings. Calls for shark monitoring systems and sonar surveillance became urgent. Organizers reviewed every coastal route planned for future races. Jason survived, but the road to recovery was long and grueling. His thigh required multiple surgeries, followed by months of physical therapy. The muscle damage was severe, and his athletic career ended the moment that shark struck. More than the physical pain, though, were the memories of being dragged under, of seeing his blood in the water, and of feeling helpless in a world that obeyed only instinct and hunger. For a time, he couldn't bear to watch water move. He stayed indoors, curtains drawn, unable to listen to the sound of waves without feeling the ghost pain in his leg. Slowly, over time, he began speaking with others, fellow survivors, trauma counselors, former athletes, and he started to confront what had happened. But the emotional scar remained, raw and deep, just like the one on his thigh. The attack was rare, shocking even to experts who had studied shark behavior for decades. Great whites weren't known to target jet skis or surface noise like this, but something had driven that shark to the surface, and to Jason. Whether it was hunger, confusion, or simple chance didn't matter. The result had been near fatal. Jason never raced again, but his story transformed the way marine sports were managed in Mozambique and beyond. The ocean had delivered a harsh reminder. No matter how fast you go or how prepared you feel, there are forces beneath the surface you can never predict. Only fear, respect, and, if you're lucky, survive. The Martins family had been looking forward to their beach day for weeks. Thomas, 39, a physical therapist and avid swimmer, and his wife Claire, 37, a school teacher, had brought their two children, Noah, age 10, and Lily, age 7, to a quiet stretch of sand near Saint-Gilles on Reunion Island. The sun blazed overhead, the waves rolled gently across the shore, and laughter carried across the warm breeze. Locals and tourists alike dotted the beach, unaware of the danger lurking just beyond the shallows. Reunion Island was no stranger to shark attacks. Over the years, tiger sharks in particular had earned a fearsome reputation along its coast. But on this bright and crowded afternoon, the water looked harmless. Warning signs were up, but like many others that day, the Martins had decided to stay close to shore, believing it was safe enough. Thomas and Noah were waist-deep in the water, tossing a foam ball back and forth, while Claire stood nearby with Lily, keeping a close eye on them. The ocean was calm and the children were laughing, unaware of the shadow gliding silently beneath them. The tiger shark had been circling the outer surf zone for hours, agitated by scent and motion, drawn in by the natural rhythms of life near the beach. It wasn't hunger alone that drove its movements, it was instinct, sharp and sudden, triggered by the erratic splashes of human limbs in the shallows. Without warning, the surface erupted beside Thomas. A massive gray shape surged upward, a blur of stripes and muscle, and clamped onto his right leg with ferocious force. The water churned red in an instant. Thomas vanished below the surface as the shark twisted and pulled, dragging him sideways and deeper. A scream tore from Claire's throat as she lunged forward, instinct taking over. Noah stood frozen for a split second before Claire shoved him back toward shore, grabbing Lily's wrist and yelling for them to run. She turned to follow, but the shark wasn't finished. As Claire spun, a heavy wave crashed behind her, and the tiger shark surged again, brushing her thigh and knocking her sideways. Its snout clipped her arm, its skin rough like sandpaper, and pain bloomed along her forearm where its teeth grazed her flesh. She stumbled and fell, struggling to rise in the knee-deep water as Lily tripped beside her. Noah had reached dry sand and turned around, screaming, eyes wide. Other beachgoers were shouting now, pointing, backing away from the water in panic. The lifeguards, stationed a few hundred meters down the shore, sprang into action. Two of them leapt onto jet skis while others grabbed flotation buoys and radios, calling for backup. In the water, Claire dragged Lily upright and pushed forward with everything she had, ignoring the pain in her arm as she tried to keep her footing against the surge. Just beyond the first break, Thomas surfaced, thrashing weakly, his face twisted in agony, blood pouring from his leg. The shark circled back, its dark shape clearly visible now just beneath the surface. One of the jet skis screamed toward them, slicing through the water, and the lifeguard riding it threw a flotation ring toward Thomas, while the second jet ski peeled around to distract the shark. The predator responded to the new threat with hesitation, swerving away as the watercraft buzzed close. Its massive body brushed the underside of one ski, and for a moment, everyone watching thought it would strike again. But the noise, movement, and crowd gathering on shore finally broke its focus. It veered off, disappearing into deeper water with a flick of its powerful tail. Thomas was pulled onto the jet ski, his injured leg trailing blood as the rider sped back toward shore. Claire and Lily were already being helped onto stretchers, their skin pale, limbs shaking. A crowd had gathered, but no one moved too close. The water had gone quiet again, and the beach that had been filled with joy minutes earlier now buzzed with the sickening weight of fear. Emergency responders met them at the edge of the sand. Thomas's leg had been torn open from thigh to knee, muscle shredded and bone visible through the wound. He was conscious barely, but fading fast from blood loss. Claire's arm was gashed and bruised, and Lily had scrapes and bruises from being knocked down in the scramble. Noah, though physically uninjured, clung to a lifeguard and cried silently, refusing to speak. At the hospital, Thomas underwent emergency surgery. Doctors managed to save his leg, though the damage was extensive. Claire received stitches and a tetanus shot. The children were checked for trauma, both physical and psychological, and kept overnight for observation. All 4 survived, but none of them would ever forget what happened that day. News of the attack spread fast. Reunion Island had seen shark incidents before, but never one that involved an entire family. Beach safety became the center of heated debate. Some demanded shark culling, others called for expanded netting and sonar detection systems. Conservation groups pushed back, urging understanding of the shark's natural behavior and habitat. The Martins returned home weeks later, limping and haunted, their lives altered forever. The trauma remained fresh. Noah wouldn't go near the water, and Claire still flinched at sudden splashes. Thomas walked with a cane now, his muscles slow to respond, his balance unsteady. But they were alive. And in a place where shark sightings had become almost routine, that alone felt miraculous. For those who had watched it happen, and for many who heard about it later, the attack served as a brutal reminder that even family beaches, those shallow, warm waters so often believed safe, could harbor sudden, unrelenting danger. The ocean, beautiful and vast, had its own rules, and sometimes it enforced them without warning, with the raw force of nature, teeth, and instinct. Zara Collins had worked in a wildlife center in Canada for nearly 8 years. At 32, she was one of the most experienced trainers on staff, fit, calm under pressure, and known for forming deep bonds with the animals she worked with. Her favorite, without question, was Kaimana, a massive male orca born in captivity, weighing over 9,000 pounds and stretching nearly 24 feet long. Known for his striking white eye patches and incredible speed, Kaimana had been performing in marine shows for over a decade. But under his calm surface, there was always an edge. Unpredictable moments, strange refusals, and long, quiet stares that hinted at something far more primal. That Saturday, the stands were full. Families and tourists had packed into the amphitheater, excited to see the orca show. The pool shimmered beneath the lights. Music played softly over the speakers, and the smell of popcorn and seawater filled the air. Zara stood at the edge of the main platform in her black wetsuit, signaling for Kaimana to breach. He obeyed, soaring into the air with grace, water cascading off his sleek body as he landed with a thunderous splash that soaked the first 2 rows of cheering spectators. The show continued smoothly at first. Kaimana followed cues, slapped his tail, swam synchronized laps around Zara, and leapt on command. The crowd applauded with every move. But as the final sequence approached, a fast-paced routine involving spins, platform poses, and a final underwater pass, Zara noticed something different in his movements. His turns grew slower, his breathing heavier, his eye contact less responsive. Still, she gave the signal to begin. Kaimana swam a wide circle, then approached the platform at high speed. Zara expected him to slow and rise vertically in front of her, as rehearsed. Instead, he came in fast and low, veering off his mark. Before she could move, his massive head slammed into her hip, followed immediately by the sharp strike of his pectoral fin hitting her side. The impact lifted her off her feet and threw her backward into the water. A gasp rippled through the crowd. For a moment, the music kept playing, and the announcer continued speaking. But then Zara vanished beneath the surface and didn't reappear. Kaimana circled tightly above her, churning the water, visibly agitated. Trainers watching from behind the glass control room dropped their headsets and ran toward the emergency stations. Underwater, Zara was disoriented. The blow had knocked the air from her lungs, and a crushing pressure bloomed in her chest as she struggled to orient herself. Pain stabbed through her side where the fin had struck, and her head throbbed, her vision hazy. She tried to swim upward, but Kaimana's huge body brushed against her again, not aggressively now, but enough to confuse and delay her. Above, 2 crew members dove into the pool with flotation gear, shouting and waving at Kaimana from opposite sides. The orca responded, slowly turning away and swimming toward one of the gates where food was sometimes offered. The second diver reached Zara, pulled her to the surface, and wrapped her arm around a rescue float. She gasped for breath, her body limp, blood beginning to streak from her nose, bruises forming already across her ribs and shoulder. Medics met her at the pool's edge and lifted her out on a board, stabilizing her spine and checking her breathing. She was conscious but dazed, her skin was pale, and her limbs were trembling from the shock. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived to rush her to the hospital. The crowd had been ushered out quickly, the music cut, the water still and silent now. Doctors later confirmed that Zara had suffered a fractured rib, several deep contusions along her hip and back, and a mild concussion from striking the platform edge as she fell. Her lungs were bruised from the impact, and she would need weeks of rest and rehabilitation. But she was alive, spared the worst only because Kaimana had not continued the assault. Back at the facility, the mood shifted drastically. Kaimana was moved to a separate enclosure and monitored closely. Some staff viewed the incident as a tragic accident, a misunderstood signal, a lapse in concentration from a highly intelligent but unpredictable animal. Others saw it as a warning, proof that captivity could distort natural behavior in ways no trainer could fully control. Experts debated the ethics of keeping orcas in performance settings. Animal rights groups reignited their campaigns, calling for bans on marine mammal shows and urging that Kaimana be relocated to a sea sanctuary. The marine park issued statements expressing concern and support for Zara, promising a full investigation and temporary suspension of all orca performances. Zara remained quiet during her recovery. Close friends and family stayed near, shielding her from the worst of the attention. But privately, she wrestled with guilt and confusion. She had trusted Kaimana, understood him better than anyone, or so she believed. Now that trust felt shattered. The orca's strength had always been awe-inspiring, but in one moment, it had turned dangerous, almost lethal, and all in front of a crowd. Months later, Zara returned to the marine park, not as a performer but in a quieter role behind the scenes. She refused to work directly with orcas again. Instead, she focused on rehabilitation programs and trainer safety education, determined to ensure others never experienced what she had. The scar on her side remained, hidden beneath her clothes, but the emotional wound ran deeper. Kaimana was never used in shows again. He remained at the facility under close observation, his future uncertain. To some, he had simply acted as any wild creature might when confined, confused, or overstimulated. To others, his aggression confirmed that captivity, no matter how advanced or humane, could never fully contain or predict the instincts of an apex predator. For Zara, the attack marked a turning point. It had changed how she saw her work, her role, and the very system she had once defended. In a place built on wonder and spectacle, the ocean's raw truth had broken through, powerful and undeniable, leaving behind questions no stage could silence. Mia Sanders had always lived for the wind. At 28, she was lean, fearless, and endlessly drawn to the power of the sea. A skilled kite surfer based in Cape Town, she spent her weekends chasing gusts along the coast, skimming the surface of the Atlantic with speed and precision. The wind was strong that afternoon, and the water was alive with energy. Perfect conditions for a long ride. Mia launched from a quiet beach near Muizenberg, where only a few other kite surfers were visible in the distance. The waves were steep and rolling, and the sun glinted off the churning blue surface. Her kite, a bright neon orange, soared high above her, catching the gusts with sharp, clean pulls that kept her cruising fast across the swells. Everything was perfect, until her lines caught. Without warning, her control bar twisted violently, and the tension snapped out of sync. Her kite jerked sideways, dipped, then crashed into the water. Mia dropped hard, landing in the sea with a splash. The wind yanked at the limp canopy, but it was no longer flying. She reached for the lines, trying to reset the tangle before the surf carried her too far out. Below the surface, a dark shape moved silently. Cape Town's waters were known for their great white sharks, especially near seal-rich coasts. It was prime hunting territory, and while surfers and swimmers were always cautious, the speed of an attack made preparation almost meaningless. The shark had been tracking a group of seals earlier that morning, but Mia's splash had caught its attention. Its instincts kicked in, not with curiosity, but with purpose. Mia was still floating, half lifted by her harness, tugging on the kite's lines, when she felt the first jolt. The water exploded beneath her. A massive great white surged upward, jaws open wide. Its teeth clamped down just above her right ankle, sawing through flesh and muscle with terrifying force. The pressure felt like fire and ice at once, searing pain mixed with crushing weight. Mia screamed, though the sound was swallowed by the wind and waves. Her body was yanked downward as the shark thrashed violently. Blood bloomed around her in a thick red cloud. The shark let go for a moment, confused by the plastic harness and stiff kite lines, circling for a better angle. Mia kicked, adrenaline surging, her mind flooding with one thought: survive. She clutched her board with both hands, wedging it between herself and the predator as it darted in again. The shark struck the board with brutal force, nearly knocking it from her grip. Mia twisted, using the board like a shield, striking at the snout, trying to push the creature back. Her right leg hung uselessly beneath her, nerves on fire, blood pumping into the sea. She turned her face to the shore, but it was far too far. Then she spotted two other kites in the distance, faintly visible through the mist and glare. She waved frantically with one arm, her body rising and falling with the swell. The shark came back a third time, more cautious now, its body gliding smoothly just beneath her. It passed close, so close she could see its cold, unblinking eye and the scars along its flank. She braced again, board held tight, ready for another strike, but it didn't come. Something in the motion, the sound, or the unfamiliar resistance had changed its mind. It turned away slowly, then vanished into deeper water, leaving only silence and blood in its wake. A rescue call had already been made by one of the distant surfers. They'd seen the commotion, the wild splashing, and the sudden pause in motion. A jet ski operated by a surf patrol unit stationed nearby reached Mia in minutes. By then, she was slipping into shock, her body trembling, lips pale, eyes glassy. Her friends helped lift her onto the sled, using towels to compress the bleeding as the driver turned sharply toward shore. She arrived conscious but drifting. The gash in her leg was deep, torn in a jagged crescent just above her ankle, with muscle visibly shredded and bone exposed. Blood soaked the sled and trailed behind them in a sickening red line. Paramedics stabilized her, wrapping her leg and pushing fluids into her arm before rushing her to the hospital. Surgeons worked for hours to clean and repair the wound. Mia lost a significant amount of blood and underwent emergency tissue reconstruction, but they managed to save the leg. She would need months of physical therapy, but she had survived. Many others hadn't been so lucky in similar encounters. News of the attack spread quickly through the kite surfing community. Images of her bloodied board and shredded harness circulated online. The shock ran deep, not just because of the attack, but because of where it had happened and how quickly the situation had turned deadly. Mia was known in the area, respected for her skill and experience. If someone like her could be caught off guard, anyone could. Local authorities issued renewed warnings about shark activity, especially during the warmer months when water traffic increased. Patrols were strengthened. Kite surfing groups began organizing safety workshops and emergency response drills. Some debated whether certain areas should be closed to water sports entirely during peak shark seasons. Mia remained quiet during her first weeks of recovery. When she finally spoke out, it wasn't with anger, but with clarity. She had chosen to kite surf in a place where great whites hunted. It had been a risk every time she hit the water, and this time that risk had caught up with her. But she refused to see the shark as a monster, just a predator doing what it was made to do in its own home. Still, the attack had changed her. Her movements were slower now, her eyes more cautious, her body marked by the trauma. Whether or not she would return to the water remained uncertain, but her survival stood as a chilling reminder. In the wild, even moments of beauty and freedom can turn instantly into a fight for life.